Good evening, everyone. My name is Andy Coronado, and tonight on the show, we discuss Laurent Courtois' dismissal, Joey Saputo's interview on Omni Television, CF Montreal's tie at Chicago, and finally, controversy with the Canada men's national team again. That and a lot more on episode 220 of The Ball is Round. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. As you guys can see, I'm joined tonight by my good friend Elias and our special guest, David Goss of SoccerWise. How are we doing, guys?
Doing pretty good, man. It was a very good soccer weekend for me. This Barcelona won both their games. CF Montreal tied. No losses this week. Look at that.
Undefeated. That's good to hear.
Undefeated this weekend.
Elias, who did they beat? They beat somebody that's like bottom.
Girona. I mean, Girona is still a Champions League team, technically, right? They're not having the best year, but a win is a win.
Bayern Munich did the same thing, so I don't know why I'm talking. They beat like a bottom feeder too, so it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Great stuff. David, do you follow any clubs, any European clubs that you
I don't have a specific team now.
No?
So I just watch whatever's good and whatever's entertaining. I normally fall in love with a team, for a stretch of like this coach, this group of players for this time period. Although I've been in love with Diego Simeone for like 15 years now. So
it's hard not to be.
I guess you could push me that way. Yeah.
They have a nice stadium too. Adam, thank you so much for coming on the show. We would have loved to have you on the show under normal circumstances, but as you probably are used to now, or you know so much, CF Montreal never has this normal moment. So thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get into the fun stuff, David, how you doing? How do we find ourselves today?
Good. It's been a weird weekend. I don't know, for people that watch a lot of MLS, I watch a lot of MLS and NWSL. It's basically rained in every corner of the continent this weekend, including here in Miami. We had a flash flood alert this afternoon, and then been watching games that have been weather delayed and crappy rain. Obviously, Montreal's game in Chicago last night as well. So it's been a weird one, but it's been fun.
We got freezing rain in Montreal right now, so even though we're not hosting games,
does not sound fun.
No, honestly, David, for anybody that's lived in Miami, when you get a flood in Miami, it's not just like, oh well, it'll go away in a bit. No, it's bad. Yeah. The floods are pretty bad in Miami. So yeah, I can completely.
We were out when we got the alert, and it was like, okay, time to rush home. Bye, everyone.
That's how it is. So look, as you guys can see, we have David on the show, and that's obviously because there were big news this week, right? Earlier this week on Monday morning at 9:15 a.m., CF Montreal sent out a short and sweet communication that said, CF Montreal has parted ways with first-team head coach Laurent Courtois. Assistant coach Marco Donadel becomes interim head coach. No other changes have been made to the coaching staff. CF Montreal would like to thank Laurent for his contributions to the club. That's it. Short and sweet. That's what they put out 9:15 a.m. Elias, can you please show us what was the Ball is Round's reaction to this news when we saw it?
Holy shit, man! Well, at least they, I think they made the message a little bit too sappy. You don't have to spill your guts to the guy or anything. Jesus, 3 whole sentences. Oh my god.
We were shook.
Well, that's not what you want to wake up to. I just started my day at work and I was like,
exactly, and it was, as you can see, David, we do our podcast Sunday nights, and we were discussing it like, we'll see what Laurent does next week. Hopefully he bounces back. You get that 9:15 and it just turns the world upside down, right? So, what was your reaction, David, when you saw that?
I think shock at first. Like, to have a coach get fired 5 weeks into a season is pretty rare. To have a coach who's at a club where what's the expectations is really odd as well. You could say if he coached Inter Miami and they were 0-5 to start the year, you'd be like, oh, right, you're off track. But to be coaching a team that starts on a 7-game road trip and you coached to a playing game last year, which is probably within 2 or 3 spots at what your hope was, right? If your range is from 6 to 10, you were in that space last year, which means you'd assume the coach is capable of getting you into that place again this year. So it was shock at first, and then you start to go, oh, right, we're talking Joey Saputo, we're talking CF Montreal, we're talking about a club that hired Hernan Losada and made Wilfred Nancy want to leave, and the Henry stuff wasn't the club's fault. Like the global pandemic was not anyone's plan, but this is a bit of a track record. So that's where then you start to like parse through it, and it's like a little bit more of, oh, okay, so we're doing this again. And I think that's kind of where I netted out on.
Yeah, exactly. No, same here. I mean, we expect this, right? CF Montreal, the media and the followers, they expect rash movements and rash rash decisions that can be made in a drop of a hat. But this came unexpected. I mean, Elias, last week when we did this podcast, one of the questions we got by one of our listeners, one of our viewers, was Normand, that he asked us, has Laurent Courtois lost his locker room? That was a question. And at that point, Elias, we're telling ourselves, no, not really. That was a response, right? We said, not really. We think the players are still fighting for him, right? They're still playing for Laurent Courtois. Very far from thinking of him getting fired, because it just felt like it was just soon. So a week now after this podcast, Elias, how do you see that now? If you're asked that question today, did Laurent Courtois lose his locker room?
Based on what Joe Waterman said, based on what Simon Piet said in their media availability, like a day after, and what Gabriel Javes said, I don't think he lost the room, but I think he was well on his way there. Caden Clark kind of alluded to it a little bit too before Courtois got fired. So I wouldn't have been surprised if this season continued the way it did, that they would have gone to that point eventually. But I don't think at the time of his firing he had lost the room just yet. There may have been certain players, individuals he lost. One of the people that comes to mind is Tom Pierce, because let's face it, you go from a starter or perennial, you're in the starting lineup one every 2 games, to not even making the trip 2 weeks in a row. Something's wrong, So I think that feeling kind of festers, because at the end of the day, a team more often than not is well glued and well connected together. And if one of their guys they feel is not being treated well or not being treated fairly, they're going to stick up for him, So I think it was in the water. I don't think he'd completely lost it yet, but right, Gabriel said we wanted to kind of get this sooner rather than later if we felt like it was unavoidable. And so that part I can't really disagree with, but again, I still think it was way too early if you look at all the context. But again, if they were going to do it anyway, I mean, they've been talking about it since Minnesota, since game 2. They had been considering firing him, right?
Game 2. What are we doing?
That's not how an organization should be run. If you think he is in that type of position in game 2, that means he was there in preseason. And that's when you make changes, and you make changes at the end of last season. And so that's what's frustrating, is like coming out and saying that is not like, oh, so we gave him as much time as we could. No, it is, we started the year with a coach we didn't believe in, and a coach we didn't think could connect to our player pool. And maybe there's contractual stuff we don't understand, of like, they didn't feel like they could fire him, like for legal proceeding or whatever. I'm just making stuff up now. But like, that's never really been the case before when it comes to sports. And you're paying out his contract to whatever extent it is already signed in. So that doesn't really matter. And that's part of, I think, what's frustrating with all of this is just top-down leadership. And I know you have the Joey Saputo interview to talk about coming forward, is that's a lack of like clear vision of where you're going and what you want to be. And I think, Andy, we did a preview together for the season for my platform over at SoccerWise. And I think we were both a little excited about like what the possibilities were for Montreal, because it felt like after the Hernan Losada insanity and like post Nancy, they had refound the path, which was getting young pieces that you think are undervalued and put them in. But all that's going to take time. You're starting a 7-game road trip. That's going to take time. So if you don't think that this guy is the right person for this job, then why start the season with him? And I think that's what's wild about, especially the comments, Elias, that you mentioned, of like not only doing it, but then acknowledging it openly.
It's also so sorry, Andy. It's also so weird because Gabriel Javet is, a a politician at the end of the day. He's one of the sporting directors, but he's also a politician. He's the head of an institution, right? When you look at it at the end of the day. And they, until they were blue in the face, they kept on repeating how Marco Donadel is not there to take over when we fire Laurent Courtois. That they kept on saying it. And we will never know the full truth, right? And I doubt that Laurent Courtois or Marco Donadel or anybody that's intimately involved in that decision will go like, oh yeah, he was always going to replace Laurent. But they're doing such a poor job of convincing people because they said it 100 times. Donadel's not here to replace Laurent. Donadel's not here to replace Laurent. And then if you're telling me you waited 2 games to go, actually, I'm sorry, but I have a very tough time believing you. Right. And
yeah, I mean, it's a very CF Montreal thing to do. The writing is on the wall, but no, we're not doing it. It's always it seems like it's part of their storyline with everything. We were talking about DPs, Victor Wanyama, Joseph Martinez, all these things that the writing is on the wall. Everybody's seeing it, but they're saying, no, you guys are crazy. You guys don't understand what's going on. But David, as you mentioned, I went into, and with Elias in this podcast, we also talked about it. We were excited for Laurent Courtois. I'm a fan of Laurent Courtois because I felt like he fit the philosophy of what the club wanted, which was to develop and sell. Was there weird things going on as the weeks passed by? He was a little off in the media. Elias, we know, you're in these press conferences as well. You see these interviews, and David, I don't know if you ever maybe caught some of those clips, but there were sometimes answers that he gave that were a little bit off. He wasn't the same as the Laurent Courtois we saw in 2024, where he was relaxed, he would joke, he seemed confident in himself. This time around, the answers are very sometimes attacks towards journalists, where they were like, you guys said this and that, and it just seemed like, I think as human beings, guys, when something is in our mind, something is maybe bothering us or we're frustrated, we maybe lash out on others. I'm not saying this was Laurent Courtois' situation, but it was definitely a different kind of Laurent Courtois. So I was in shock, and I definitely think it was too soon. But as you guys said, we all agree here that it's a CF Montreal thing. Very normal.
Sometimes it's
right?
par for the course,
And in saying all of this, and I think you both agree, right? We're not saying Marco Donadel's not going to be a better manager. We're not going to say it's not going to go well. It's just, I think it destabilizes an organization and continues an appearance from the outside. And what we talked about on our show this week, and I got some messages from some Montreal fans, and some agreed, some disagreed. I think some sort of misconstrued a little what we were saying is, if Marco Donadel is not the full-time manager, it is not an attractive role for someone, because 1 week into the season, their leadership goes into a room and says, are we going to stick with this person? So like, if I'm looking at my career and saying, where do I want to put my career? Where do I want to join? Joey Saputo in this interview talks about passion and being involved and wanting to be at a place. It's hard to be fully committed to something that has a history of not being fully committed to other people. And as you said, Laurent Courtois, it feels like has changed slightly. And even last year, right, we were hearing stories that some players were struggling with him. And I watched that Caden Clark interview as well. And I think that's a warning sign. But also Caden Clark has dealt with this in his career.
Yeah.
And so he wasn't really the messenger for all of that. Like if Caden Clark says, oh, I don't know why the coach doesn't play him, it's like, well, let's look at the 4 last coaches who didn't play you. And so there's a little bit of this and that. And I don't know that I would say more of the players in Montreal feel that way than don't, because for all the Jaquil Marshall-Ruddies that are getting pushed out and Caden Clark not, getting rotated out, you also have players that are getting in, right? Dante Seeley's getting into the team. So there's give and pull on all of that. And I don't know that you fully lose a locker room, but what I've been hearing from coming out is a lot of players didn't like playing for him. Now, if you talk to a lot of professional soccer players, they never like their coach. That's like not always the relationship you're looking for. It's not your best friend. It is not your father figure or your mother figure or whatever you're looking for. So there's ways to manage that and be successful. And maybe Marco Donadel will. I thought last night there was some spark to the team. Felt like they played on the front foot a little bit more. If the new manager bump is merely a 1-1 draw on the road and, a half point more XG, I don't know if that's enough.
No, of course. And that kind of, I wanted to ask this a little bit later, David, but you actually bring it up. And Elias and David, I'll ask you guys both this. Does anybody want to coach CF Montreal? Does anybody want to coach CF Montreal? The writing is on the wall.
It depends. If you're expecting to go out there and get like a Greg Berhalter type figure like Chicago went out and got, or get a manager with significant repute, I don't think so. Just because, again, like David said, the instability, right? A lot of these coaches want a clearly defined project with an actual end game in mind. Now,
Like the Bruce Arena and all that.
Montreal has a clearly defined project, but one thing that I gun to my head, I could not tell you is, where does this club see itself in 5 years, right? And the big thing I'm concerned about, and I think sooner rather than later, Gabriel Javez going to have to answer for, where does the club see itself? Do they actually know where they want to be in 5 years? Because this whole thing of promoting young talent and getting it to the next level of their career is one thing, but you have to have actual barometers for success and for actual stuff. Like, this year we want to do this, and then you can't do that if you're changing coaches every year. It's not the Defense of the Dark Arts position at Hogwarts here. It's not fair to any new manager that comes in and they go, well, even if I have a decent season, my job's already at risk less than a month in of the next year, right? Because let's face it, with the way that Montreal was playing at the end of last season, it's clear Laurent Courtois knows how to build, at the very least, a competitive team in MLS, and knows how to line up a team in a competitive way. But them ignoring all the context into why the season was so bad diminishes, the reasons he was with which he was fired.
I would say Laurent Courtois is someone taking Polyjuice Potion to be Wilfred Nancy, like Mad Eye Moody style. Sorry, I couldn't let that one go.
References. Let's go.
I had to jump in there. I think you put up a comment there from Roberto. That's always true, which is there's X amount of head coaching jobs.
That's true
in the world. But what you get into and what we talked about on our show is and what Elias you're talking about is the quality of those managers. And I think, the Vancouver job opened up. And there's a ton of question marks around Vancouver. One, where are they going to be? Who's going to own them? Therefore, how much are they going to invest? And yet you still had veteran name managers, Gio Savarese being the big one, putting their name in. I don't think those managers are going to put their name in for a Montreal job. So you're always going to have someone who will take it. I would be shocked if Jim Curtin even accepted an interview. Like, Jim Curtin's getting paid out by Philly. He has he's probably in that Greg Berhalter combo that you're talking about of like bigger names, a little bit elevated outside of MLS to an extent. I don't think someone like that is going to try and interview for this job. So are there managers who maybe haven't been around as long or haven't had a job as long, right? Remember when Wilmer Cabrera took over? Like, that was someone who wasn't really getting opportunities around MLS anymore, and this was his chance to get back in. I think you'll have the other Laurent Courtois of the world, which is second division managers or assistant managers or whatever who want their shot. And I wouldn't be shocked if Montreal ends up, if it's not Donadel, going outside of MLS because they may not know their reputation the same way. I think that probably is part of what happened with Remy Gard of like, yeah, okay, it's a good place to live. They have this ambition, right? It looked good on a presentation, I'm sure. In an interview, in a meeting, there was probably a PowerPoint and a deck and all that stuff. So like, you can get people. Someone will manage this team. They will not go out there with Sam Piette picking the roster every single day. Well, it could be Sam Piette in the end, which I wouldn't be like shocked by if he just goes player manager.
I could see him behind
that would be so cool. Yeah.
But I don't think you're going to have the pedigree of options. And I don't think anyone's going to stay. Like, that's the part that's really hard for me coming out of mainly the Nancy thing, is like, that's the dream scenario. Committed to the club, knowledgeable about the market, connected to the city, got their opportunity because of it. And Montreal's honest about the fact that like they're not going to be the big shark in Major League Soccer and world spending. Nancy was aware of all of that. He was connected to all of it, and he felt he had to leave. So even if you nail this signing, even if you hit it out of the park and you go and you get, I don't know, let's say it's Bobby Smirdiotis. Let's say it's Danny Cruz at Louisville in USL. Let's say it's a manager, I don't know, in League Two, who is a 31-year-old genius, the next Eric Ramsey, and is going to put everything together. It just, there's nothing about the club right now that feels like they're going to stay around for a while. And then you get back into the situation. I think that's the really frustrating part to me from the outside.
Well, look, based on what Laurent Courtois said in his introductory press conference when he first joined back in 2024, one of the reporters asked him, "So, what did Wilfred Nancy tell you? Did you talk to him about the Montreal?" And he told him, "What was it, Elias? Buckle up and enjoy the ride." Right? That's what he
Yeah,
told him. That's what Wilfred Nancy told him. Buckle up
foreshadowing.
and enjoy
Jeez.
the ride. So everybody kind of chuckled, because it's funny. But today, March 30th, it's been a week. No, not even a week.
Oh,
The
it's been
Honko has
6
been
days.
fired a few days ago. Do you think he buckled up and enjoyed the ride? I
Probably.
I
mean,
definitely think he buckled up.
Yeah.
Um,
especially let's think about his 2024, right? Let's think about his season 2024 how it went. Elias, David, I don't know how closely you followed it, but there were a lot of ups and downs, especially with the whole
it's
Joseph
almost
Martinez saga,
exclusively
Mathieu
ups and downs.
Choinière. He lost his sporting director that hired him, the assistant sporting director, the franchise player Mathieu Choinière requests a trade. They lose to a CPL team in the Canadian. I mean, buckle up and enjoy the ride. All that while the fans are like, we're out kind of deal because they're losing everything. But then they magically get their, excuse the language, they get their shit together and they finish the season off strong, and they get into the play-in, right? With versus Atlanta where they lost. What were your expectations after all that? After he buckled up and then I guess enjoyed 2024, what were your expectations going into 2025 for Laurent Courtois before the season? David, I'll start with you.
I think more of the same. Like I said, I think the range we were talking was like 6th to 10th place in a good year. Maybe a little outside of that, but trying to push in. It didn't feel like there should be an obvious jump. I think the hope was stabilization, that rather than last year being 4 games barren, then a really good finish to the year, it would be off and on as the season went along, week in and week out. In Miami, I went to the stadium and watched Caden Clark play for the U.S. men's national team, and I thought he was really good in that game. I was excited about him. I was excited about some of the other pieces. I love Nathan Saliba. So I think the hope was to take a half step forward with all those players, but it was not going to be, can they push for top 3 in the East this year, right? Though I think the nature of this beast is going to be build something up, sell those players, reset yourself, build something up. And they were not going to be at the top of that build this year. I don't know internally the conversation around like what a 7-game road stand to start a year should be. I don't know the points goal. I don't know the realistic goal of like style of play and what you want to be coming out of that, because that's just like an unreasonable way to start a season. And I know it's the reality, but like I don't understand how anyone expects to come out of that strong. But I would have said like if they looked more stable but finished in a similar spot to last year, I think that would have been a fine season.
Exactly. And Elias, no wins after 5 games on the road. On the road. Okay. And scoreless nearly for, I believe it was nearly 400 minutes.
Well
Elias,
over, yeah, over that.
was it too soon? Was it too soon? Should Montreal have waited at least to come back home to Stade Saputo and maybe get some of those injured pieces back to have a justifiable reason to say it's not working with Laurent Courtois? Or what do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the 3 most noteworthy signings they made this offseason. It was Hennady Sinchuk, Jalen Neal, and Giacomo Vrioni. And all 3 of them have not seen not even the bench, right? All 3 are coming back from injury. So, you know, I don't know what I don't know what the club's expectations in a global capacity where silverware in the playoffs, MLS Cup and Leagues Cup and Sports Shield, I think it's a bit of a reach. But at the beginning of the season, with the state of Vancouver and Toronto, Canadian Championship was very reasonable, and playoffs again, were very reasonable objectives. So I think it was too soon, right? And I said this from almost from the get go that it was a bit too soon. But at the same time, like I said at the top of the show, if this was already on the wall, if the writing was already on the wall, and they were actively looking for reasons to fire him, and just kind of get on with it and bring in Donadel and then just restart, because that is effectively the end of the Olivier Renard era. This was the last kind of major piece that he brought in. Then yeah, get it over with sooner rather than later, because A, you owe it to the players, and B, also owe it to Laurent. You don't want to fuck around with a coach and just say like, yeah, you're kind of like a dead man walking, but we'll keep you around, and it's like a poorly kept secret, right? because then that's just not fair to anybody, and then you look even worse somehow.
I think that
So
Veroni and Neil, by the way, I think that's a really good point as well. Of like from last year's team to this year's team, the jump was supposed to be through some of those acquisitions, and they've been incapable of being on the field so far. So how
it's
can you
really
judge his
unfortunate.
How
ability
can
to
you
use them
judge
or
it?
not use them?
So LP House fan did leave us a little comment. He said two things can be true at the same time. He wasn't the right coach, and there was a lot not to like.
Mhm.
He's been very vocal about what he doesn't like, LP House fan, and the results weren't completely his fault. So that leads me to a question. And I'll also mention something here, David. Is Tom Bogert when sent out a few tweets following the firing of Laurent Courtois, where he mentioned about the investment that CF Montreal does on their DPs and the lack of investments, better said, on the DP and all that. Is Laurent Courtois fully to blame for the poor start to this season?
No, I wouldn't say he is. I think, like Tom was trying to allude to, like this is not a club that sets themselves up to be the favorites in a lot of matchups. And I'd add on top of that, and like this, you could say it's realistic or unrealistic. I don't really care. They don't put a roof on their own stadium. So their
Yeah.
team has to start with a 7-game road trip. Like that's a disadvantage for him as a coach. Laurent Courtois has coached 5 games this year. He wasn't a favorite in any of those games. You have here as well. They have not put together an MLS Next Pro team. So they don't have that structure fully fleshed out. I think they have one of the thinner academies in Major League Soccer when it comes to age groups. Like I don't think it goes down as far as U12,
does not.
and I know they manage a lot of it through public schools and all of that program, which is all great for them. But again, all of it is a lack of investment in the club to put them in their best potential position. And so it's hard to blame one person for, it's not like you can say, well, look, we give you every advantage and you drop the ball. The team plays at a disadvantage, both in their spending, both in the setup now they're in. So to say a coach hasn't won a single game in a situation where technically they weren't supposed to win any of those games, you can't blame one person for it.
Elias, would you say that CF Montreal, because as you guys know, Marco Donadel was hired as an assistant to Laurent Courtois over the offseason. You mentioned it earlier that, CF Montreal, Gabriel Gervais, even Laurent Courtois said, no, he's not here to replace me. Do you think CF Montreal made the right move to hire Marco Donadel as an assistant? And should Laurent Courtois, with that hiring, have seen this coming? I mean, him as a person, should he have seen this coming when that move was there?
Well, I mean, I can't speak to what Laurent Courtois should have or did not suspect or feel. But I think on paper, Marco Donadel is a really good acquisition because you have people like Donadel and Johnson that come in as Laurent Courtois' guys, right? They were his people that were brought in as his assistant coaches. And Laurent Courtois, these are all people that are not relative. They are very new to the city and to the club. Having someone like Marco Donadel who understands the club, the dynamic, and the community, and what the community expects of a club like this is super important. You also need an experienced defender and defensive midfielder, especially if you're playing in a double pivot and you have your ball playing center backs, and that's someone whose profile is very similar. So I think on paper, it's a really, really strong assistant coach signing.
Yeah, but then why do you fire Laurent Simon? Isn't he the same kind of?
Oh, I think there's a bit more there. I think that was a bit bilateral. I don't think Laurent Simon, because he also threw his hat in the ring for assisting for the head coach job when Hernan Losada got fired, and he did not get the job. So there could have also been some tension there, and then maybe his willingness to stick around was not as strong. Again, this is all behind closed door stuff. That's all whispers in the shadows and rumors and gossip and high school, right? But I think ultimately, with Laurent Simon gone, bringing in someone like Marco Donadel who fulfills a similar purpose and is a similar profile of player is on paper a really strong addition.
And also, do you think, David, do you think that CF Montreal made the right move by putting that kind of pressure on Laurent of say, hiring a Marco Donadel? Because he did have his picks of assistants that he hired over the offseason, but there was one move that was clearly not, even though he was, as they said, consulted for the Marco Donadel hiring, which I'm not sure what consulted means in this case.
Yeah.
But Do you think it was the right thing for CF Montreal to put that kind of pressure on Laurent Courtois?
I think it's probably clear to most of what we're talking about that there are probably fans of Marco Donadel in the front office and ownership of Montreal who saw him be available and didn't want to take the risk of him being somewhere else. That is a move that I think they could say on the surface, well, we think he's a great soccer mind. He understands the club, right? He's connected to it. He understands the league. So I think someone from CF Montreal would argue to me that they were trying to do what I said they didn't, which was like, we're trying to give the best resources to our club. We think this is a great soccer person who we can bring in and he can help Laurent Courtois and he can help the club and he can help players at this club get better. As you said, though, it becomes very obvious from a political point of view that you're, putting your head coach in a bad position. And very often we will see this, which is clubs feel a little stuck because maybe they don't want that head coach, but they don't feel like they can move on. And so this is sort of a way to affect them. We've seen RSL do this. They've sort of like forced a whole slew of new assistants on Pablo Mastroeni. And it worked last year to a large extent and hasn't worked as much this year. But like that was the club saying, okay, we like some of what you do, but we think there are holes in your game. And rather than you just developing yourself, we're going to bring in a different entity to help you do that. So you could argue that it's okay. But then when you get 5 weeks into the season, you fire them. And clearly that
Nothing
those would have been false arguments. And maybe in the end, Marco Donadel in 3 years has them competing for a home playoff game, a top 4 team. And the reality was that when they were able to see that he was available, they just had to get him in the door and get him to be a part of the club. And that's probably what ended up happening.
Yeah, and that actually leads me to my next question. I just have a few last questions here to finish before we move on to our next topic. Which you bring up a good topic, David. So what does Marco Donadel need to do now to prove that CF Montreal made the right decision of firing Laurent Courtois?
I would say if you were looking in contrast to Courtois, stability would probably be a big part of what he could prove he could bring. It feels like one of the issues from last year that carried over to this year was like a ton of chop and change to the lineup, especially for young players whose confidence you should be trying to build and trying to progress forward. And so I think for Donadel, if he can bring that level of stability and composure from his position, that will maybe help the players be able to have that on the field and carry that out. So I think the goal would be, can you find a style that allows you, if you are cohesive enough and well coached enough, to earn points and outplay opponents who maybe spend more and have higher budgets? And then in doing that, can you also continue to progress young players forward? I think at the end of the year, if we do this again and we talk about CF Montreal and we can name 2 or 3 young pieces that were like, they had a good year and it looks like there's a road for them to have a better year next year, that's probably what they're looking for while remaining competitive week in and week out. It's a lot of what we did say about Laurent Courtois this year. Like, I think if Donadel has the same season, then that's probably enough.
Okay. And Elias, according to you, because we follow it more day by day, right? What does Marco Donadel need to, kind of make the CF Montreal forget about a Laurent Courtois? What's his standard now this season?
Just an attractive style of football, right? At the end of the season last year, when they were again at their best, they played really fun, entertaining football. They were scoring goals for fun. They were attacking. They were taking teams on, and they were enforcing their own style of play on the other teams. Which even at home, they were not doing that well at the beginning of last year and in 2023. So I think that more of what we saw last night against Chicago, more attacking play, more more audacity. And Caden Clark again alluded to it without in very uncertain terms about how players are maybe scared to make mistakes or try something new or try something a little bit audacious. And it was reflected in the style of play. It was a very rigid, very boring, very negative style of football, which is not what you're expecting from the Courtois either. So yeah, I think that what Marco Donadel is trying to push, if the players can get into it, then they will score goals. But it's more just now about doing it reliably and not getting counterattacked and slapped 4-0 because you decided to play super open
Yeah.
and then looking like idiots.
But that's the thing. To me, in my opinion, what he has to do is do better than what Laurent Courtois did with a whole season last
Yeah.
season. That's it. That's the standard. You do better than Laurent Courtois. If you're the same or less than Laurent Courtois, then what did we do the firing for? That's where I'm at. One last question before we finish this topic. What's next for Laurent Courtois? What's
Oof.
next for him? Does he deserve a chance with another MLS team to maybe with more resources? Or we saw it. Wilfred Nancy did what he did with his great coaching talent. We'll call it talent. Um, he did it with more resources, more stability, and ownership that runs a club properly. Um, does Laurent Courtois deserve that chance somewhere else? I'll start with you, Elias.
Like, he's shown that he can organize a team and he can set up a system where players can succeed, but the problem is he's kind of in limbo from where Nossi was when he was leaving, where at least Nossi had
Success.
the proof of concept of a successful season behind him. He's proven that he can orchestrate success, but the thing is, I don't think teams that are in a position to succeed are willing to entrust a project onto him. That's the thing. So he's kind of in that limbo. So I think he'd be better suited to take another project team and actually show, maybe a team that's willing to give him a bit more leeway and show what he can do first. And I wouldn't be surprised if he found that, whether it is in the USL Championship, in the CPL, or then again, an MLS team, in the bottom third looking to move up.
Yeah, I think there's zero question that he would be, considered a high option for an assistant or a two-team coach, right? Like what he succeeded with in Columbus, I think he would very easily be able to walk back into if he wanted to, depending on his soccer connections and sort of where it ends up being. He's got a little time at the LA Galaxy as well. Like, I think the feeling is the Crew 2 stuff was good. And he proved that he, like you said, he has a cohesive idea about his soccer and he's able to express that. So I think that's a really strong starting point. There are obviously, because it's 5 weeks into the season, no openings for him. So if he wants to sit around for the year, get paid out and then wait, he would probably get, quickly high on a list as openings start to get created around the league for teams that are struggling. But I really think, like you were saying, Elias, like if he's going to get an opportunity, it's not going to be at a bigger club. It's going to be at a club in a similar setting to Montreal that's saying, like, can you come here and can you help us beat something with a nickel and two dimes on this, and not like we're going to put in a huge investment and it's going to be really good. And maybe it is a USL championship club where he's in charge of his own signings and his own roster a little bit more, or CPL or whatever it is. I wouldn't be shocked if we see him as an assistant coach this year or at the end of this year. And then we see him maybe try and get himself back into some interview opportunities.
Or maybe Columbus, as LP Habs fan says, maybe Columbus hires him as an assistant for when Nancy leaves. He knows the club, right? He knows the people. So that was it for Laurent Courtois. Next up, we just have a small section for Joey Saputo because he did give a very rare and important interview in Italian. So thank you to those who read the Patreon. It's we tried our best to translate it. So were there any takeaways, guys, from this from this interview from Joey Saputo? Maybe just some quick takeaways that you got out of reading the interview. Elias, what about you? What would you say were some takeaways?
Nothing he said surprised me too much. I was expecting something kind of inflammatory and kind of like, oh, that's interesting to read, and I did kind of get it. It was very on brand for him as well. I think, with the way he speaks about Montreal and the way, I don't think anyone ever doubted whether or not he loved the club. It's very clear no one invests 30, 35 years of your life into something that loses money periodically if you're not in love with it. And my sentiment was really that, that is essentially what killed his time at the club, because he couldn't just step back. He couldn't just take his foot off the gas and let the club work. And so yeah, I think he's kind of aware of it too, which is a good thing, right? And but I think that his time as super involved in the club is past. You know, he wants to be involved in Bologna. He spends most of his time at Bologna.
Yeah.
All
Well,
more power to him, you know.
yeah. Well, that kind of, one of the things, David, that he said was he kind of grew frustrated by the criticism he
Yeah.
received here in Montreal over the years about what he calls it passion and love for the team, while also saying that at Bologna they accept him as he is. They say they understand my passion. They everybody, we are all one in Bologna. But as a CF Montreal, someone that's been following CF Montreal for all these past years, his passion has led to some pretty remarkable events in Montreal, including the firing of Wilfred Nancy. Do you think his complaint is valid when you hear it?
No, not really. I think it's fair to say like he is passionate. He does care. Sort of some of what you were saying, Elias. I think a lot of this interview read to me very much like a billionaire Nepo baby of like just like a lack of understanding of other people and how the world works. It's like, man, if I had billions to lose on a soccer team, you better believe I would. Like,
Yeah.
it was kind of like, I'm a Knicks fan. It's kind of like everyone's like, oh, Spike Lee's the biggest Knicks fan. He sits courtside every game. It's like, you think if I didn't have courtside tickets to every game, I wouldn't go? Like, cool. That's good for Spike Lee. I like the outfits, but that's not the hard part. And I think the lack of understanding of just like, oh, I was too passionate, so people told me to step back. It's like people wanted you to hire people who were good at what they did and let them do their jobs. And so you stepped in and you didn't. So then you decided to take your ball and go home. So like when he's talking about throughout the interview, oh, maybe I'm not invested enough. Maybe I'm too invested. So when you went and moved to Bologna, does that mean the team lowered spending at Montreal? Like, can the team only push resources if you're in the building? Because if that's the case, then yeah, people would like for you to be around, even if you're not great at it, so that their team can have money spent on it. And if you don't want to spend money on a sports team, you don't have to. That's your right. You should probably sell the team to someone else who wants to. And like, sports are not traditional businesses, right? Fans are not customers. And whenever any sports owners wants to say like, well, fans are still coming or fans aren't coming, it's like, yeah, people from Montreal are from Montreal. If they like soccer, then they like the team. Yeah. And that's not really going to change. But it's not a normal relationship between a company and a consumer and a product. And so I think a lot of that interview read that way. And as I just said, I'm a Knicks fan, I'm a Jets fan, I'm a Mets fan. Like, I've been around bad sports owners. I know them all. And
Woody Johnson, right?
What? Woody Johnson. Yes. The lack of understanding of what's going on is always a big problem in all of this. And I think a lot of it came out in that interview. And like you said, Elias, there was not like a groundbreaking thing said. There was not anything outrageous. It was just sort of the overall like tone and discussion of this like belief as well that like his presence in these things is what causes them. And it's like, well, it's probably more the investment. And the investment comes through your billionaire family that your father created and built and that you are all now pulling from.
Exactly, and it's one of the, I think one of the more ironic things that I read in the article was that he says, in Bologna, I'm allowed to talk to the coach. I know nothing. He says, I know nothing of technicalities, formations. I know nothing of that. There's experts that do that, but I can still go talk to the coach, and it'll be mutual respect. It's like, yes, you're right, Joey. I mean, you're their owner. They're gonna listen to you.
Yeah.
But there's a line that you're walking that not everybody's going to be okay with, and that's where it's like you can build yourself into say that that's good or bad. But in any case, I felt like that there were some ironic things that were said. But he did mention that one of the biggest differences between Montreal and Bologna is the patience of their fans as they work to make the team better. He mentioned it a few times that he said they let us work, they let us do our thing. Do you think of the lack of patience from CF Montreal fans is justifiable, David?
I thought this was a weird quote because, like, is there a lack of patience? I don't know what the high water mark of this is. It feels like when Montreal, So I've been to a decent chunk of Montreal games, but a lot of them have been when the team is good because that's, I go to playoff games and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So the building's always pretty filled and people seem to have fun and enjoy the team. It gets covered pretty well. And then when the team's bad, I think fans are supposed to say the team's bad. I think that's what happens. And that's the reality.
Yeah.
I just don't know this like absurd moment that's occurred where the fans stormed out or the fans refused to come or, we're burning images of him. It feels like the team has gone up and down, and most fans have accepted that. And they will watch the team. And as it goes up and down, they kind of understand, the reality of it. I don't think any Montreal fan's happy about losing to a CPL team. And that's like probably understandable. So I thought this was a weird quote in just there are some fan bases that have outsized expectations of their club, and there is no space to take a half step back to take a leap forward. I don't know that Montreal fans from the outside, at least, seem like that fan base. So I thought this was a weird one to sort of choose to go in that direction.
Yeah, Liz, do you think it's justified that the fans are like impatient, right? They're like, Joey, we want you to spend money today on a DP. We talked about it earlier, right? The DP spending, the talent that you're putting on the field. This is what I took as being impatient, right? The demand for more. Elias, do you think the fans are right in asking for this? Or is he right in saying that the fans need to be patient while he works?
Robbie's right. This is BS, man. I mean, you look at Bologna, and up until 3 years ago, they were a bottom half team, and if you look at 10 years ago, they were like fighting relegation, right? Joey's not new to Italian soccer. If it's Serie A, they'll show up to your doorstep with pitchforks. I don't know what kind of patience he's talking about. You have Thiago Motta, who, again, from his days, again, I'm saying this because I know, but like from his days at the Barcelona academy, he was, revolutionizing and doing things a completely different way. And so it led to Bologna and it worked, but I mean, he's already out of a job at Juve. So I think patience is not what I would describe Serie A. And, Joey, you are a born and bred Montrealer. Where did you expect patience from sports fans in Montreal? Have you met Montreal sports fans? No. An LP Habs fan said, Habs, we have patience if there's a solid plan and investment. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
But there is no plan. Just saying you want to have youth and develop youth is not a plan. It's a statement of intent. Congratulations on your statement of intent. But Jalen Neal, Hennady Sinchuk, these are players that I believe in your because not only you're just going out and getting long shots and trying to find needles in a haystack, you're going and getting actual youngsters with promise, with potential, and you're spending money on them, right? They spent a pretty penny on Jalen Neal. They didn't say how much they spent on Sinchuk, but they said it was one of the biggest investments the club's ever made. Those are players that, so you finally understand that spending money and developing youth are not mutually exclusive. You want to be like Benfica or Dortmund or Ajax. They don't spend $100,000 on a kid, right? They spend millions of dollars if need be, if this young player that they're going to develop anyway is worth it. That's not how you're going to attract top talent, is by, churning out one or two good players every 15 or 20 players that you bring in. That's not how that works. Go ahead.
I would add to that and just say what we talked about in terms of infrastructure. If you say you want to be a team that develops and sells, FC Dallas and LA Galaxy said that, and they started two teams when no one else had them. Philadelphia said that. They built a residency academy that's the top in the country, and they go out and they recruit players and they put them in a scholarship program and they fund all of it. So you don't have to spend on DPs. You can say that's not our model. Our model is to develop young players, but then you have to invest in developing the young players. You can't just say it like you just said. You can't just say a thing. And if your idea is to give them first team minutes that other teams won't because they're not ready to play, then yeah, fans are going to be upset that your team's bad. And like, you are not doing it in a way to be successful at all. And that goes into the like multi-model clubs, right? Where you have these American owners that buy second division Latvian teams and third division Belgian teams, and they're going to stick 18, kids from Cameroon on the team, and they're going to lose and they're going to play them and then they're going to sell them. It's like, that's your decision, but no one's going to show up to that. And don't say, well, I don't know why anyone's showing up. So there's options of ways to run a club that way. They haven't really swerved into that lane at all. They've just continued to sort of run themselves as just a standard professional team, but just giving young players more minutes that aren't really ready for them, and they don't give them the support around it. Like, it's not a coincidence that Ismail Kone played well when Victor Wanyama and Samuel Piette were in midfield with him. That's how you get better. Georgi Mihailovic, the same. Like, and CF Montreal, I will say, when they ran the USL team, I did a lot of these games, and I would be at the games with people who commentated with me or, scouting, whatever. And Montreal would put out a U17 team against professional teams, and they'd get slaughtered. And the kids didn't learn from that. They didn't get better.
They still did. They did it up until this year. They sent them in semi-pro league.
Right. And young players don't get better from that. I like the idea of giving young players opportunity and space, but you got to build it somehow. And if you look at some of the clubs that have done it well, there's a 23-year-old college draft pick that they'll put in central midfield, and they'll go and get players that they know who maybe want to become coaches and are finishing out their careers to play in a position. Or if there's a hole at center forward because Joseph Martinez is leaving, go and get MD Myers, who won a golden boot, and say, listen, if you play well, there's a chance to jump up here. But for now, one of your roles is to be a central force and take the pressure off some of these younger players. That's how you do things like that. And Montreal hasn't done a whole lot of that. And so that's, I think, where if you were to say, I don't want to say the name of the fan because I don't want to say it wrong, Habs or whatever. I understand it's a Canadians thing, but it's not my that's not my lingua franca right there. If you don't have that plan and you don't have that system put in place, then it's hard for fans to get excited about it.
Yeah, and David, I don't know if you've probably heard of this, Elias. We hear it almost every day. There's always a fan saying le déménagement, the move, right? The move that they say that the team is gonna move. The team is gonna move because they're not investing. It's an everyday conversation among CF Montreal fans. Joey Saputo mentioned the frustration of the obstacles he is running in with the city of Montreal to improve. We're talking about improving the infrastructures and soccer in Quebec. But at the same time, he emphasized that he's a big believer in the MLS and its future. Does this raise any concerns to you guys? These frustrations, these obstacles, because he said it's so different at Bologna. I mean, the mayor has opened their doors to me and super concerned. But then he also says that to renovate the stadium, they had budgeted for 100 million, but then it went up to 220 million. So it's a little bit of an issue, he says. But does this raise any flags?
Elias, you're talking about the Serie A thing. Does anyone in Serie A build stadiums? It's Juve, and that's it. All of the stadiums are 1990s Euro stadiums. That's like this, Euros, right? That's like the story. The story of Serie A is there's no infrastructure and it's crumbling, and that's a massive part of this.
I love the aesthetic, but they're basically decrepit at this point. There's no upkeep, right? And Tate makes a good point, right? Unless Montreal changed its model, because I don't know if you know, but they don't own, Saputo does, and the club don't own the stadium. Yeah. Right. And so it's an outdated stadium, 100%. It's one of the smallest stadiums in MLS, and they regularly have one of the highest percentage attendances. But, when that percentage is 18,000, good job. It's not really noteworthy. So, you're going to continue to bleed money, right? Investment in these clubs is what you need to stop hemorrhaging money like this. He said they're losing $20 million a year. You're going to keep losing $20 million a year until you actually do something. So complaining about the money you're losing and then not doing a single thing about the money you're losing, at some point I stop feeling bad that you're losing money because you're not doing anything about it. There's only so much you could say, woe is me, for someone who's worth billions of dollars. I'm sorry. Do something then. And like you said earlier, if you won't, sell a team to someone who will. I think anyone who talks about déménagement, I mean, two things. Either they're still traumatized by the Expos, or they don't understand soccer culture in Quebec. Because there's no way there won't be a professional soccer team in Quebec, in Montreal. There's too big a soccer culture here. People who are traumatized by the Expos, I understand. That's a traumatic loss for baseball fans. But there won't be, it's not like the club is leaving. The club won't be leaving.
I hope you're right. It scares me a little. I just think the Vancouver talks over the last few months have sort of opened that door of just
what if
there's just a bunch of problems. One being conversion rate stuff and like, competing in an American sports league as on Canadian dollars, like that sucks. That's scary. I think I know from people I talked to, a little push from the other side as well of, the people who have pushed the Canadian League and CPL and that type of stuff of like, well, why are you playing in American League? Why don't we have this only Canadian League? And why don't we have this set up? So I know there's push and pull from both sides. I think the safest assumption would be what you're saying, which is like the odds are that it's still there. But like, it is a little worrying that at some point you start to reach the numbers where I don't think MLS is going to expand to 50 teams. And so there's one in a market. And if someone else wants to pay a ton for it to move it to Detroit or Las Vegas or whatever it is, that might be what ends up happening. And how much money can you find in the area? We're hearing about RSL right now again, of like RSL being sold, and they got sold to the Blitzer Group, and now the Blitzer Group selling them so quickly. One of the problems for a lot of these sports teams is like they can't find owners in market. And then when you bring an owner in from out of market, they're just not going to have the same connection. There's just no way of fixing it. Every time an owner comes in from outside of a market, being, tech savvy, Anthony Precourt. I'm a tech guy from San Francisco. I love Columbus. No, you don't. You don't love Columbus, Ohio. You like Austin, Texas, because South by Southwest is there and you think it's cool. And that's where the team ends up. And so I think that stuff is fair to be scared about for fans. And I think it's a little worrying, but there is great history behind a lot of this. And very few clubs in North America have that. And so you would hope that whoever else looked at a project like this, part of why they would invest in it is because they are acquiring that history and starting, on third base already and not having to build something up from the ground. Now, I will say on the Saputo's confidence about the league and then lack of confidence about the team, this is like kind of in the playbook. He did this going into the last CBA where, the commissioner has to talk about how the league's a rocket ship and everything's perfect. And then the owners have to talk about how much money they're losing so that the players don't ask for more money because they think the league's a rocket ship and everything's moving in one direction. And Joey Saputo often falls in that role. And so it kind of felt like he was playing that role again here.
And it's something that he also made a mention to. He did make a mention to the schedule change. I don't know if you guys caught that, where he said that there might be the possibility of schedule change that we've been hearing rumors about after the World Cup of the MLS changing its schedule, right? So a very interesting interview. I highly recommend that everybody goes and reads it in the Patreon and leave your comments. David, like I said, I would have loved to have you over in another circumstance to talk good stuff. We might do this. There's always the opportunity to do this another time when things are looking better. But David,
we'll do it going into the Canadian Championship, Halifax, Montreal matches whenever that ends up happening. Let's go Wanderers.
Let's go. But David, seriously, thank you. I know it was heavy topics that we talked about, and as always, love your perspective from the MLS side, right? We know that you know the city of Montreal. Guys, please go check David and Tom Bogert on SoccerWise. If you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit more, David, about where they can find you, how often, and what do you guys do? Go ahead.
Yeah, we put out 4 to 5 shows a week covering MLS and NWSL, international teams, Canada, the US. I think we're going to try and do some stuff around NSL as it comes out. I would love a Montreal Roses jersey. So if anyone sees that lying around and needs my address, just let me know. But it's really, I think, for anyone who's listening to this show and loves soccer in this region, it's covering that. And so we cover it wherever it interests us, wherever we can find it. We are live for the most part on YouTube on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays between 2 and 3 p.m. Eastern time. And then everything comes out as a podcast. So it's called SoccerWise. You can search it anywhere you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple, wherever else. And we've got a Patreon and a Discord if you want to get involved. We've got depth charts in there as well as salary cap tables. So if you want to say, oh, what does the next few years look like for Montreal? Where is the money invested? What do they look like compared to other teams? You can jump in there, and we have a lot of information in there for you. And then our Discord to hang out and talk soccer whenever you want, like right now during the NWSL and MLS games that are going on. Last night, Canadian or CONCACAF Champions Cup this week, all of that type of stuff. So, we like soccer. We enjoy it. And I will say, as you mentioned, less fun, a lot of the heavier topics, which we cover, but also the fun stuff of like, it's cool to watch Dante Seeley and Shaquille Marshall-Ruddy and Nathan Saliba and Caden Clark. Like, learn and get better and all of that type of stuff. So
Yeah.
I think there's some fun stuff out there for Montreal, and we're definitely going to be watching.
Absolutely, David. Thank
Not
you.
always bad.
Yeah.
Just most
On
of the time.
behalf of the ball is round, Elias and I, thank you, David, so much, and we hope to see you very soon.
Yeah.
Thank you again. Good one then. All right. So on our end, we're gonna go ahead and move on, Elias. We're gonna go ahead and move on
The
to
main event.
last night's game, CF Montreal
Hell
versus
yeah.
Chicago Fire. What felt like to me, Elias, it felt like a win, man. It was a tie. It's the first game under Marco Donadel. What were you expecting from the team, Elias? Before we even get into it, what were you expecting from the team?
Before we get into the game, I just need to. Is optimistic Robbie?
Is he back?
Oh my god,
Mm.
optimistic Robbie.
Change of coach, change of Robbie. Go ahead.
No, yeah, I love what I saw. Right, we talked about it a little bit, but this was a team that was clearly enjoying was the most enjoyment of football I've seen all season. And we talked about a bit before, right, in the first 2 games of the year, you and me, where it just looked like, remember when they were talking about, especially Caden Clark said he was enjoying his football, and it did not look like they were having a good time out there. They were playing extremely negative football, extremely hold on for dear life kind of football. And last night it was, I don't even want to say caution to the wind, because defensively they were quite solid. It just seemed like people playing a game for the first time all season.
Okay. For me, like what I was expecting from the team, from the even before the game started, like all of Saturday morning, Elias, I was thinking like, what is tonight gonna be like? What is tonight gonna be like? What are regardless of formation, regardless of who's starting, I want to see something different than we've seen in the past 5 weeks, where we get don't get carried away. You started it, Robbie. We're gonna keep going. So anyway, so I expected something different. I don't know what it was, but new coach, hopefully new rhythm, and the players said it in the pregame press conference. Elias, they said, I think you guys are gonna enjoy seeing us play. You guys have seen us in practice. And they were very open about the back four. We're changing formation, all that. So those were kind of where I was expecting, right? Like, let's see something different. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the lineup. I'll go ahead and come on. So to start from the bottom, we have Josie Roy. Nice. We have a 4,
Oh
2,
my
3,
god.
1. What is happening right now?
Eyes deceive me? Yeah.
I think you got the wrong game. Anyways, 4, 2, 3, 1. At the bottom, we have Josie Roy. At the right back, we have Alec Guboglo, who came on our show with an interview. George Campbell, Joel Waterman, Luca Petrosa as a left back. We have double pivot Samuel Piet and Victor Loturi. On the left winger, we have Caden Clark, Bryce Duke, and right winger, we have Dante Seeley. And as the 9, as a striker, we have Prince Owusu. Cool. As always, I always ask you, Elias, you look at this lineup, you would probably think about it all of a sudden just like me. What were your thoughts when you're looking at this lineup and this formation?
Again, I was about 93% sure that they were going to play 4-back, but this was also a very similar lineup, but you could technically play 5-back with, because we have seen that verbatim. That was, the back 5 for the last 2 games. So we literally had to wait to see until kickoff whether or not that would be 4 or 5-back and where Dante Seeley be playing. But I was very happy to see a 4-2-3-1. They've been training in it all week. Maxime Truman, who goes to training and who reports on it, you got to check him out because he's got all the good stuff.
It's the best.
They announced it and they said it, and you see, and like whenever you go to training, you see Dante Seeley on the offensive side of the ball, taking people on one-on-one, especially on that right side, doing exactly what he did all game. And it's really good shit. And the fact that he's able to do that now in game, I think it's only going to get better.
All right. Yeah, I thought it was when I was looking at that lineup, when I saw it, I said, well, you know what? Like I said, I'm expecting something different. If this 4-back, we either get CF Montreal either gets destroyed 4-0 or we put up a fight. And I think we'll talk a little bit more in depth about the game a little bit later, because we are going to break it down position by position. Like I said, I just wanted something different, and just with the starting lineup, I'm seeing wait, is that a Dante Sealy on winger? Do we have a solid winger right now? And Caden Clark as a left wing, like what is happening? Like I haven't seen this in what feels like 20 years, right? So it was very, very interesting. But let's go ahead and break it down position by position. We'll start with, because it's the first time we see real wingers. Up top, we saw Prince Owosu, who had a,
Yeah.
I would say, Elias, he had a decent
Nope.
all around game. I will say decent all around game because he did everything right outside of the box, but he missed some infuriating easy chances. Elias, 5 games now. Now it's going to be a 6 game. Heading into a 6 game, is it time to bench Prince Owosu?
I don't know about bench, but now this was the first game where you were actively dictating the game. More shots on target, more possession, more chances, more XG, more everything except for goals. When you have your striker, right? I don't care if he was not the main guy that was brought in and Jack Mavroni is. You are a TAM player. You are still making upwards of like $800,000 a year. I'm assuming we'll have to wait till the MLSPA guide comes out. But you are making good money. You are a TAM player. You are brought in with, yes, certain requirements that do not involve scoring. But at the end of the day, those are more important when you are playing negatively. So, for example, when you are playing in a 5-back in a 5-3-2, and your job is also to press and and to defend, yeah, I'm not saying no. The Whitfield played a big role. Plus, his run opened up Sealy to being on alone. I'm thinking it's talking about Owusu, and like, yes, again, you know who else we said good job about that when they were dominating, but Montreal wasn't scoring and it was hurting, was Chinonzo for. Right, he does more work than Chinonzo for. I'm not gonna slander him because I still think you're right. Besides scoring a goal, he had a good game. He got the secondary assist on the Dante Sealy goal. He set up Luca Petrasso's ball. His hold-up play was excellent, but that is not good enough when you are the team that is dictating the game. When you were the team that was, again, like I said, doing mostly defending and playing for a draw, which is what they were doing the first 5 games of the year, let's be honest, then I liked his performances. Now I need you to be scoring because you were put in a great spot on a number of occasions. And yes, the most noticeable one was when you basically had a free penalty and then you skied it. But there were a
No, for
couple other
sure.
moments too where it's not good enough. And I think, I honestly think that games like this, he needs to score an actual goal really quickly to kind of get that chip off his shoulder or the monkey off the back or whatever expression you want to use. Because I also think it's starting to be a mental thing now. That miss looked purely like it was a mental thing. You're a professional footballer, you're a professional attacker. You at least get it on target, man. Come on.
Yeah, and look, I said it. I said it. He had a decent performance, and as you said, we agree on that. He had a decent performance all around outside the box. But Elias, for someone that is, because that's what it feels like, right? Right here in CF Montreal, most players here are looking to revive their career or maybe break through. I think someone like Prince Owosu is maybe looking for his next contract, be it here or elsewhere. Probably not here. But nobody's gonna remember. I'm sorry, Elias. Nobody's going to remember the nice things you did midfield or the setup you did or whatever. They're going to remember the goals that you scored when you're a striker. They're going to remember the goals, the assists, and all that. But if you're not getting in the stat sheet and you're only getting in the stat sheet for the wrong reasons, such as missing shots, wide open shots, then that's why my question is starting to be, yes, he has a big influence. I believe LP Habsman said, Wolfo ran around like a chicken with his head cut off. Owosu is impacting the game as time goes on.
I'm not putting them in the same boat, right? He is miles better than Chinonzo 04. But you do not want to be a rich man's Chinonzo 04. Let's
Yeah.
be real here.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where I'm starting to question it. Yes, we're all waiting for the Vrioni return and all that. Absolutely, we all want to see him there, and we want somebody to challenge Owosu. But at the same time, why? Maybe he needs that benching. Maybe he needs that wake up call, right? Because I mean, when are we gonna see Owosu? And like you said, it was a formation that served them well, guys. Sorry, I just want to kind of those that are still that are listening to us. It is a loaded show. It is a little bit longer than you're used to, so we do appreciate your patience. We're gonna try to, you know, Let's express ourselves like we always do, but this is a heavy week, right, Elias? It's a heavier week than usual. That's why we even invited Mr. David from Soccer Wise to discuss it. So thank you so much for being patient with us. But next up, we got on the top, we had Caden Clark and Dante Seeley as wingers, while Bryce Duke played kind of a number 10. It felt like this new formation, Elias, was made for all of these three players to finally play the position that they are most comfortable with. Elias, that's what I saw when I was when I saw the lineup. I was like, hey, it looks like it's freedom for them because that seems to be what they known that position. All three of them.
Yeah.
What did you think of that?
It was awesome to watch wingers and a 10 actually get to do what they're supposed to do. Caden Clark, I think, had the least glamorous game, but the work he did was really impressive, especially when it came to making space in the middle. Right? He was more of a facilitator last night, and so he didn't really get as many touches on the ball. He didn't really do as much, but what he did do, especially on his side of the field, was make room for Bryce Duke and Prince Owusu, which in turn let the entire right side of the field develop a lot more. Dante Seeley had the game of his life.
Yeah.
He was phenomenal, right? But that only comes because every team, at least for the next few weeks, is going to be working around Caden Clark is the guy. Caden Clark is their best player. Caden Clark needs to be planned around. So if he sticks to his job, and this is something you have to give some credit to Laurent Courtois, where he tried to make a point for Caden Clark to just take a step back sometimes, to not always try and initiate things and let the game come to him. He did that. And some games, while waiting for the game to come to you, it won't. But what it will do is open stuff up for other people. So he did his role really well. When this team gets more comfortable in this system, he will get more touches and be more dangerous. But I'm happy that just because he wasn't busy, he didn't go out looking for stuff to do. Because that's how you crowd your teammates' space, which let Bryce Duke and Dante Seeley in possession be phenomenal. Bryce Duke was not the same Bryce Duke. He was running. He was running consistently. I was at a loss. So the three of them, all three, worked in perfect harmony, I think. They did a great job, and I can't wait to see them play more.
Hey, man, we criticized, thoroughly, and we also gave credit to, the famous Bryce Duke that has his up and down games. And we've said it in this show, Elias. I've said it plenty of times. It's infuriating how perfect of a game Bryce Duke needs, perfect setup he needs to, you've mentioned there in this show that it's a Bryce Duke at Saputo and Bryce Duke away from home. Yesterday they were playing at Soldier Field in Chicago, and what I saw from Bryce Duke, well, I was impressed with his showing. I thought he was free. He was free. He was running around intense, like you said, a lot of running. And Dante Seeley, man, like, wow, as a winger, and he hasn't played. I don't think he's played a winger in a few seasons because even in Dallas they were using him as a wingback. I don't know if all the games. I don't follow FC Dallas that close, but he was originally being played as a wingback. So is he again? It just felt, Elias, like that position. All three of those players, they were just released from chains, and they said, "You know what, guys, just have fun, do what you're comfortable doing, but while maintaining kind of like you said a balance, right?" Because it was very interesting the way that the switch that Seeley and Guboglu would do once in a while. Because in the first half, they said it was very clear. It was, at least to my eyes, it was very clear. They said attack the right side. But the second half, they said, let's try the left side. Let's try Caden Clark. Didn't necessarily work, so they went back. So it was very interesting in that sense that, we're like, let's have fun again. Let's try stuff. Because they've only had, what, 3 days of training. You can't do a massive change. But Elias, it was kind of a massive change. The formation did change, and the wingback position pretty much got erased. Even though you can see that they still have some of those tendencies, some of those defensive work that maybe they learned over, playing wingback or whatnot, kept over in this position. But Caden Clark has also shown, I know we spoke about it a little bit. He's shown a lot of frustration, and these past weeks, either in the press conference or he said things. We also saw last week that he threw a bottle of water in the ground. Didn't want to read too much into it, Elias. But do you think with this, the way we saw last night in this formation, could we see the 2024 Caden Clark that CF Montreal got to see? towards the end.
I think he was always there. He's just utilized completely wrong for the first bit of the season. And here it looks like a bit more mature Caden Clark. Because like I said, he wasn't doing a whole lot, but then he wasn't going out of his way to try and force something. Right? He let the game come to him. He let the play revolve around where it needed to be. And if the game ever needed him, he would be ready. So in the next few weeks, you're going to see him get more and more comfortable doing that. I hope, right? Because this is what I'm taking away from just one game. It's a small sample size still. But what he was doing was exercising a lot more restraint and patience. So when he's actually going to get a game where they get a favorable matchup on his side and he's going to get to see more of the ball, he's going to get to do what Dante Sealy did. And then you're going to have two wingers like that running at defenses. You're going to have a Ken Clark that's maybe a little bit more confident. Stuff like that, I can't help but smile a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that is the kind of attacking, positive football that has been promised to us forever, right? And that has not been a thing. So if this is really going to be of the blueprint, then it's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, and that's something when we talk about freedom, Elias, one of the things that we had noticed in the attack when they weren't scoring goals was that it constantly felt like the players were kind of just trying to do their job, do the role, and whenever somebody didn't do their job, everybody got mad at them. So there wasn't really that like improvised moment, like the Marco Donadel said in the press conference, where like you have to kind of, the players kind of had to learn to feel the game, like feel what's going on, not just like fill a role, right? So very, very interesting game. Now in the midfield, we had Victor Latori and Samuel Piet kind of playing next to each other, but also kind of switching back and forth. Sometimes Victor Latori went a little higher. What were your thoughts on the performance in this new scheme?
I miss Samuel Piet so much.
That's Samuel Piet?
Oh my God. Did this team need Samuel Piet? Holy shit. People want to complain and people want to talk shit and people want to say that he's not good enough and people want to say all these things. And then he shows up after not being there for a month and you go, oh my God, everything makes sense again.
Yeah.
He is, and again, it's because he does the work. And Victor Laturi did a very, very capable job. Again, I keep on describing Laturi as capable because, again, that's what he is. He's not going to be a starter, at least not right now. But what he's doing is not ruining the game.
Yeah.
I think that he and Piet and a little bit Joel Waterman did drop the ball on the goal in terms of coverage because why is he allowed to have that much time in the space? But for the rest of the game, he was very capable. And I think having someone like him off the bench or in rotation is really good because now he's showing he can do it over multiple games. You let him grow and you let him consistently get more comfortable with the partnerships like a Saliba, like a Piet, it's going to get even better. But that team, that 11, if you take out Latour and put in Nathan Saliba, and Nathan Saliba that now is going to have the onus to actually play football and get forward and drive with the ball and be hopefully the Nathan Saliba that was seen last year is very exciting. It's very exciting to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, I really liked what I saw about, like you said, Miss Samuel Piet just playing that position.
Yes.
I mean, it's the Samuel Piet. I think the fans know and love, right? The ones that they want to see at his best. But I liked Victor Loturi's contribution to the offense. I think he was very, very good at distribution. However, I did notice that there was a big lack in his defensive awareness part of the game. In the only goal that Chicago had, I don't want to put it fully on blame because I think Joel Waterman was also a little bit misplaced. So we'll get to him in a bit. But I didn't like Victor Latori's defensive awareness. It might be something he needs to work on. Maybe it's not something he has the habit of playing like. But yeah, and then obviously that leads me to the next one, right? Nathan Saliba is going to be out for a few. They said I think 1 or 2 games. I think in this scheme, Elias, he's a good fit. I think he will fit, but because we've mentioned it in this show in the past several episodes where we're kind of, growing concerned about Nathan Saliba's progress because he, the president has mentioned it, Laurent Courtois, the former coach, has mentioned it, that Nathan Saliba, this is Nathan Saliba's year. He needs to, you
Mhm.
know, take that leap. And we felt like we saw a regression in his play and in his impact in the field. But in this formation, at least the way Victor Lottori was utilized is the way that I see a Nathan Saliba at his best. So I'm
Mhm.
excited to see him back. I
Yeah,
think if
absolutely.
if we can, because they cover a lot in this field. Now I don't know where Fabian Herbert's fits in that in his return. Maybe I don't know. Anyways, we'll see. But we'll get to the back four. Back bar. I'll say it 5 times. A back bar. But let's start with the fullbacks. We had Luca
Mm.
Petrasso and Alex Guboglu. How comfortable did they look in this role? Luca
They look
Petrasso looked
great.
like
They
he
look really good, man. Look, LP Hassan says I want to see Sealy play left back instead of Petrasso.
Mhm.
Speed, stamina, and offensive capabilities play a similar role to Davies. I agree with you in terms of profile, but there's a reason I wanted Sealy to play left wing back over Petrasso, not left back. I think having him as a winger, especially cutting in onto his left foot, showed a lot of danger, and he strikes the ball too well to put him at left back. Sorry, Petrasso did a good job. Petrasso had a very again assist notwithstanding, he had a very good game. He had a very complete game, and I don't think he has the speed, obviously, of someone like Dante Sealy, who is just a more technical and quick player, but he does kind of partner Joel Waterman well in possession. And so I really liked, you know, how he navigates the space. I really like the way he was supportive but didn't get caught out all that much or at all really. And so I like Petrasso right now. I think this system will suit Tom Pierce a whole lot better as well
yeah.
because there's a lot less running to do. There's a lot more possession. And while it's more possession, it's not static. So he's still moving, but there's less for him to do offensively in terms of running, not in terms of possession, just in terms of running. And I think that defensively will help him kind of maybe stay a bit more grounded and not get caught out so much. On
And
the
yeah,
right side, Guboglu was Guboglu, man. He was so good again. He got caught out a bit um on the goal where he was a bit, that's where the lack of experience maybe shows a little bit. But again, for 89 minutes, he was really, or for how long he played, he came off in the 70th minute, I think. He
yeah.
was really solid.
And I agree with that. Something I actually saw, Elias, I hadn't seen this before with Courtois, was that whenever Joel Waterman had the ball and he was kind of like, looking where to pass, where to send it,
Mhm.
you would see Petrasso would kind of sneak up to the top, almost to a winger position. And he did like a quick little jog over there. He would get past Clark and go to a winger. And then as soon as Waterman changed the side of the field, he would come back down. So it's a very, very interesting where they're trying to increase the amount of players, try to maybe use Owusu's, ability to get the ball down
Yeah.
and just get players in the box. And Petrasso's
I mean, that's how the goal happened, right?
yeah, exactly. And it's very it's actually very, very interesting the way it's happening. So yeah, I really like Luca Petrasso. He really seems to be finding, actually a place in this squad. And Elias, a lot of the players we're talking about, I believe 3 months ago, 2 months ago now, maybe not that long ago, they were trialists for CF Montreal in their training camp,
Mhm.
and they are contributing. We are talking about players that are starting in the lineup, and they were trialists. If these kind of performances continue, Elias, we are going to be talking about steals
Yeah,
as
again, it's a very small sample size.
yes.
However, if this can be replicated consistently, then yeah, you're laughing because A, you spent nothing on them, and B, you're probably paying them next to nothing as well. They're all super young, right? Even Brendan Craig is 20, I believe. Dante Sealy's 21. Luca Petrasso's like 23, I think. They're all extremely young. Um, and I think if you manage to harness that and make it somewhat consistent, oh yeah, you are again, Corey Ray looks like a mad genius because
Yeah.
you go, you. Perfect.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So let's hope for that. Now let's go to our back
Yeah,
two.
like Tate said though, right? 0 wins. So you call them steals when they're getting results.
I think it was Hattie that used to say, he said, we need 10 games. 10 games at least to see what if it you know
Apparently, Montreal only
happens.
needs 2, but whatever.
Too soon. Tear. But but the back two of George Campbell and Joel Waterman had a solid performance, in my opinion. I think they led that back two really nicely. The two of them, man. You start asking, like, man, is this the combination that works? Those two, because now they made a big signing with a Jalen Neal, right? They
Mm-hmm.
made a big signing, but you also have a Fernando Alvarez that is
Mm-hmm.
also not doing, say, bad, but it works with Joel Waterman and George Campbell. What did you think of their performance last night, Elias?
Again, goal notwithstanding, and I feel like that's the big caveat. The goal did make the defense look bad.
Yeah.
But Joel Waterman, not Joel Waterman, sorry, George Campbell said before the game that they're not scared about defending anybody individually. And they kind of backed it up because besides that goal, Chicago, which is a team in white hot form, which ended Vancouver's perfect streak and played them off the pitch, they won 3-1, has been scoring goals for fun. Hugo Kuipers is a goal a game, or not anymore because he didn't score last night, but they are an excellent attacking team, Chicago.
Yes.
And they looked absolutely toothless. They looked like they had no ideas. They looked like they had no system. They looked like they looked like Montreal in the first 5 weeks, where it's kind of just like, let's chug it up there and hope something good happens. And Montreal looked like the team that's been playing together for 2 years, and that's on the way up in the East rankings. So again, this is one game and it's one sample size, and I don't want to get too high on this one performance. But a game like this and a game like that where you handle, again, the keyword is handle, opposition like that defensively is very impressive.
Yeah.
Now, my only concern, and actually, have good timing. LP fans said it. It's about George Campbell, because when he was playing in a 3-back, he had license to go on his little merry adventures and go
Yes.
scampering off into the distance. When you're part of a back four, you do not have that liberty. I just hope that his time, especially in the last 12 months, he's grown so much as a player and as a decision maker that he can now translate that into a back four. And he did that last night. He made no mistakes. He was excellent once again. I just hope that that kind of continues.
Absolutely. And that kind of leads me to my next question. It's a small sample, Elias, very
Mm-hmm.
small. But do you
Tiny.
like Elias? Sorry, do you like
Yes, I do.
Joel? Do you like Elias and Andy in the back four? No. Do you like Joel Waterman and George Campbell for the rest of the season? It's a small sample.
I look, they've played together for this is their third year together now. You throw in someone like Jalen Neal, you throw in someone like Fernando Alvarez, and that group of center backs, that four is very strong.
Mm.
I think once Jalen Neal is fully fit, he's going to be asking some real questions because of just his ability to play the ball. But there's also reports in training that he was also training in a double pivot.
Yep.
Right? Sporadically. He also played center back, so don't take that as gospel. But the thought of that is very interesting to me, because having Jalen Neal in your double pivot he is one of the best ball playing center backs in MLS already at the age of 21. So I think that having him further up the field in a team that struggles to really break lines in possession could be very interesting. The thing now is, where does Nathan Saliba fall? Where does Bryce Duke fall? Then there's other questions that permeate from that. But the good thing about Jalen Neal is that on the ball he is so effective that you almost have an embarrassment of riches with him.
Yeah. It's true. It's true, absolutely. And that's where, like, you're absolutely right that you're gonna start asking questions, right? Like, there's a lot of talent. You can only imagine that Jalen Neal is going to take over that George Campbell position if if Campbell gets sold in the transferred in the summer. We don't know, but he is playing. To me, I've told you this in past podcasts. George Campbell seems to be taking that next step where it just seems easy at times for him.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I'm at with
Mm-hmm.
that. Even when Elias, the
Christian
moment
Benteke
he's out of
and
the moment,
Sturridge, Hugo Kuipers, he's pocketing them all.
the moment he's out of the lineup, Elias, and this is how much you realize how big of an impact he has on that back line, is that the moment he's out because of injury or international call up, it is noticeable.
Hmm.
Not anybody, Usman Jabang, they had Brandon Craig to try to. It's not the same at all. And I'm not talking about just defending or, like you said, shouting out star talents. I'm talking about the contribution to the offense, the way he organizes his side of the field and how he's going to do
Yeah.
it's a whole different level of game. So that's why he's seeing the game at a different level. And I don't know if it's going to be a summer transfer or maybe end of the year transfer, but I don't think he's going to be with CF Montreal past 2025.
Well,
That's
even if he does stay, if the state of the American defense stays the same, he's going to get called up in June for the Gold Cup
absolutely.
because the way he's playing right now is excellent. And to be quite honest, the American center back pool is poor. So I think that he has a very good chance of getting called up.
Yeah. And we're gonna go ahead and finish it with the goalkeeping, right? Jonathan Sirois.
Goalkeeper.
What'd you think? What'd you think of his
I mean,
performance?
again, he didn't have a whole lot to do. The goal was not impossible, but a very difficult save. Made a beautiful save on that header. I don't know who took the header though. I think it was. I don't
Where
remember
he
who took
was
the
like,
header.
"Ah!"
Yeah, I mean, as you
Yeah,
should. That was
yeah,
a goal
that
saving.
was
That was a
massive.
surefire goal.
Yeah,
Just tipped it onto the post. Excellent. And yeah, look, Jonathan Sirois with the ball was
Ugh,
decent.
yeah,
He was okay. Definitely not as bad as he's been at other moments. Right, he did find some releases and did find some good balls into space. But this was another day at the office for Jonathan Sirois. He
yeah,
had a good game. It could have been a lot better, but it also could have been a lot worse. And I
exactly.
think he's starting to establish this kind of regularity where he's becoming reliable. Chris Brady, on the other hand, is excellent and probably one of the most underrated goalkeepers in MLS.
God,
Actually, so good.
what are we
But
doing?
Jonathan Sirois is quietly becoming more reliable, which is what I like. He hasn't made any stupid monster mega mistakes. And that's good. That's
Yeah,
good.
and that the way CF Montreal played yesterday, we've always said this, right? Because last year he gave up a lot of goals. Um,
Mhm.
it had a lot to do with the instability of the defensive line and what was
That
going
too.
on around him and all that. But yesterday, I felt the way CF Montreal played, they dominated the game and they gave Josie Roy little to nothing to deal with.
Hmm.
The only issue I have, Elias, is that if you're gonna play that way, where you don't let him, like you don't have him involved that much and all that, Josie Roy needs to be the kind of player that if he's gonna be called upon, say 5 times in a game, be it for a
Yeah.
stop or a kick or an important kick, whatever it is, that's when he needs to perform. The rest of the time, it's okay. That's not the way they're playing it. They're playing a whole different style. But in order for him again to take that next step, he needs to the 5 minutes he gets in the game, be the best goalie
Hmm.
that CF Montreal has on that squad. Because
Yeah.
we all know that there's a new signing and we don't know if there will be more. So we'll finish it off with this. Last but not least, let's talk about the subs. Did anybody impress you in particular about the subs?
Not particularly. I don't think any of the subs played badly. Who were the four? It was Shaquille Marshall Rudy. It was Shaquille Marshall Rudy, Mahalo Poku,
I have it here.
Fernando Alvarez, Sunusi,
Dominic Yankov.
and Yankov. Um,
Yakov.
it was nice to see Dominic Yankov in his actual position as a lone 10.
Right?
Um, yeah, that wasn't terrible. That
Wait, was
wasn't
he?
entirely unpleasant to watch.
It felt like he tried a little too hard, in my opinion, because
I
like
rather
he,
he tried too hard than not try hard enough for this
yeah,
guy.
yeah,
Honestly, like every other time he'd been on the field in the last since he signed, really was kind of just like he looked like a passenger. Here he was actually doing stuff, and I like it. I was really happy with that. Snoozy needs more minutes, man. Snoozy needs more minutes. But yeah, besides that, Fernando Alvarez, J.K. Marshall Rudy, Mahalopoku, all were capable. They all did a good job. They didn't worsen Montreal's chances. But I'm very again now that the club has actual wingers, like actual out and out wingers, Mahalo Poku, you have no more excuses.
no,
You have no more excuses. It's a new coach. You're being encouraged to be attacking. You can be on your right sided, your preferred right side. You have to be at the very least really good every time you're on the field. the very least.
Seriously, no, that's exactly what I thought, Elias. I thought, I didn't think that Dante Sealy would be starting, Elias, when we're going to that true winger. It
I
needs to
thought
be
he would.
Mahalo Opoku. This team
I
invested a
think just
lot
based
of
on form, he was going to start.
Elias. If Mahalo Opoku is having a trialist start over him in his natural position, then there's an issue. So
But it's a trialist that has maybe just a bit more game sharpness, right?
Yeah, but at the end of the day, like, how much more do you need? Because he has gotten minutes. Maybe again, not in the most natural position for him, but he has gotten minutes in the past. He hasn't been injured. He hasn't been out.
Some of the most depressing minutes I've seen all season.
It's like a meme. No, but it's in. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just
Yeah,
at this point he needs to, like you said, there's no
yeah.
excuse. And
I'm
and
very
and
excited for him, though. I'm very
from
excited for him as a player because it's clear that he was not enjoying himself. So now you're in a good environment. You're in your position. I'm happy for you. Go play football now.
what I'm
Go enjoy your
surprised is
football.
that they didn't put JMR as a right winger. Because I would have thought that in this scheme, I would have thought they would have deployed him as a right winger. That's what I thought.
The thing is, if you have Mahala and
Yeah, it's too
Dante
much. It's an
Sealy
overkill. Yeah,
playing really well, look, in a pinch, that's the thing, right? He's versatile enough. He could play right wing in a pinch or right back in a pinch. He could do both.
yeah,
Last night he played right back. But if injuries or international duty or just squad rotation need it, he can definitely play right wing. It's his natural position.
absolutely.
So I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, it's gonna be very exciting. Next week we got Columbus, so it's gonna be super fun.
Mhm.
Last part of the show tonight, ladies and
Ugh.
gentlemen, the Canada Men's National.
Oh, so stupid.
Liza's like, do we have to? Yes, we have to, because we covered the Canada national team here. Controversy in Canada. Elias, the men's national team this week. Elias, does it ever end? Does it ever end the drama with the Canada?
No.
I'm not even gonna say men's or women's. The national team. Does it ever end?
Get your club in order. Why are they trying to sue people? So stupid.
Hey! All
Oh,
right. So
go get on the plane to Bavaria and sort it out, man.
Alfonso Davies was injured during the past international window during the third place game, Canada's third place game against the US. After further diagnosis, his injury has taken him out for the season. This led to some back and forth between the players' team and the national team. And when I talk about the players' team, I don't talk about necessarily Bayern Munich. I'm talking about his agents, right? Going public
Mm.
with a whole story. And even included Bayern Munich mentioning that they could sue the national team for negligence. Now, let me tell you, I'm a fan of Bayern Munich, and I can tell you, I don't know if any of our viewers or you guys have seen that documentary that they put in on Prime, following the team around, and it is Hollywood City. It is always drama in that club, right? So I wasn't surprised to see come out like, well, we could possibly sue Canada. What are your thoughts on this kind of back and forth, this game that's going on right now?
Robbie once again is speaking through me. Yeah, not a bit overblown. It's completely overblown. What are you talking about? It's the international break. Injuries happen all the time. In fact, that's what 90% of the international break is. Clubs getting fucked over by injuries to their players. This is not new. You're upset that he played a third place game. It's Canada US. It's the main rival. Would you be upset that if a French player didn't play a game against England, or if a
Yeah, but if it takes him out for
if
the
a
season,
Portuguese player didn't play against? Yeah, shit happens. It's soccer.
he's
You
saying he was
if
forced by the coach, Elias.
okay, if Alfonso Davies or anybody from the medical staff come forward and say, "Yeah, I was injured and was in no certain terms, strongly recommended that I play or else XYZ," he is the most untouchable player in the national team. If he didn't want to play, there's nobody on God's green earth that would compel this man to play. There's nobody that could. Jesse Marsh, what's he gonna say? I'm not gonna call you up next window. It's Alfonso Davies. What are you talking about? No one can make this guy play. Alfonso Davies has repeatedly said and shown how committed he is to this national team by traveling from Germany to Canada on God knows how many times to play with the national team or even just train with the national team. So I'm not surprised one bit that he and Jesse Marsh both agreed that he would play. And look, when you look at the injury, it was also through a bit of contact. He landed funny, and it's just really unlucky. Anybody that's gonna think to sue, what? Like, no, that's ridiculous. And no, I think they're just. I don't even know what they're because it's not the first injury they ever had. It's just Bayern. They get injured all the time. It's kind of like Barcelona. International breaks are like our worst enemies. I get it. But I don't think Barcelona's ever threatened to sue a national team or federation because one of their players got hurt, even though Barcelona actually has the Spanish team overplay their players, and they've never sued the Spanish federation. Like, I don't get it. Anyway,
I mean, Bayern in itself is a club that's. I mean, if anybody here, and if any of our
you are
business,
far too serious of a club to be acting this unseriously.
it's
It
silly.
makes
No, you
no
would
sense.
think, Elias. That's why I said watch the documentary. You'll find out how serious of a
Oh
club they are.
God.
Oh man, it was the good old days, but no, it's just silly. I don't get it, and I understand, Elias, from the point of view of an agent, and agents like protecting their. I've spoken to agents, and agents will always make protect their players at any costs, and obviously that's kind of the domino effect where they're, now that the agent said it, so the team is going to say something, and then all
Yeah,
of a sudden,
but
but
the agent makes no sense. He just signed a long-term deal with Bayern, and he just signed one of the most preferential deals the national team's ever seen. The agent's job is done for the next 3 years. He has nothing else
no,
to do in terms
that's
of
why
football.
he needs the attention. Leave him alone.
But this is the thing. This is bad attention
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
He's
no, it's silly.
he's making his client's life worse. What the fuck
Because
is
it
this?
puts such a strain with the national team too, and the fans are like all of a sudden like, wait, what? Also,
You're
Davies has
causing
thrown
unnecessary drama. So
seriously. But look, guys, we know we had a long show today. It was a heavy week, I think, for all of us, Elias. Right? There were a lot of
Jesus
topics to be read,
Christ.
to be written, to be seen, to be all
Lots
this.
of eye rolling this week,
A
folks.
lot of high rolling, and honestly, thanks so much, David Goss, for coming over. We know it's a special topic, but thank you for everyone who joined us today. Who we hope you enjoyed
Absolutely.
tonight's show. As always, the podcast will always be free to listen and watch on all of our platforms. Make sure to check out our Patreon page for exclusive member content and all of our social media platforms. We're on Instagram, TikTok, we're everywhere for more content. Big shout out to all of you who joined the Patreon this week. And thank you again to all of you who tuned in tonight. And see you next week for episode 221 of The Ball is Round.